This video will walk you through the second requirement of this bond problem when bonds are issued at a discount, and the emphasis of this portion of the question really focuses on what happens when we have to start, if we're the borrower, what happens when we have to start repaying or making the interest payments that we've agreed to on the bond. So what I've got a little timeline here for us, and what you'll notice, you can refer back to the problem to make sure I've done this correctly, is the bond was issued on July 1st of 2016, and this little 1 says, well, that represents the first month that the bond was outstanding. And so what happens is, since the bond pays interest semi-annually, it pays it on December 31st and June 30th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months pass, right? And so we're out here December 31st, the very last day of 2016, and we have an obligation to pay those bondholders the interest that's explicitly stated within the bond contract. And if you go back to the first part of the problem, we calculated that we have to pay $1.92 million with every 6-month passage of time because that's what's stated in the contract. So let's go ahead and do that, right? So on December 31st of 2016, we have to record interest expense in the amount of, and I'll go back here and I'll just reference this cell, $1.920 million. And so cash would go down by the same amount. Now, I intentionally did this problem incorrectly because if you aren't paying attention or didn't pay attention in class, this is what you would have done, and it's wrong. It's wrong because the interest expense is not only the amount of cash that we pay. And you got to go back and remember what happened was, when we issued the bond, we received proceeds that were much shorter than, or they were much fewer than the amount we requested, which was $32 million. And we talked about that being the discount, and that discount is an extra cost added to the interest payments of this bond that the bond issuer needs to recognize throughout the life of the bond. And so what we do is, instead of taking that, whatever it is, $3.4 million, the difference between the face value and the amount we received, and shoving it all through one accounting period, we spread that difference out. That difference is the discount, $3.40 million. And so I have these T accounts listed here. The amount in the discount is $3.403 million. And remember, because of the matching principle, we match the interest expense with the period in which the organization benefited from whatever the item is that we're expensing. And in this case, it's extra interest. So the bond lasts for 20 payment periods, 10 years. So we're going to spread this $3.4 million out over 10 years. Really over 20 interest payment periods. And if we use the straight line method, all we're going to do is say, okay, the interest expense is not only the cash we received, it's some portion of this 3.4 million. Well, how much is it? The straight line method says you divide that total initial discount by the number of payment periods. 10 times 2, because we make 2 payments every year, so that's 20 periods. I divide that by 20, and so I get $170,176. And so what happens now is that that cash amount is correct, but I shouldn't have done that. Hold on. So the cash amount is correct. My interest expense is wrong. It's got to be more than the cash that was paid. Right? So the cash, our cash goes down by $1.92 million, but we know the interest expense is the sum of the cash we're paying plus the amount of the amortization. So circular reference, sorry. I can do this manually. I don't have to do it manually. Sorry. So that amount, the 1.92 million plus this $170,176, that's the total amount of interest that we're going to expense in the current period. But the cash we pay is only the amount we agreed to pay based on the items explicitly stated in the contract. So this is the right amount of interest expense to record on December 31st of 2016, but the journal entry doesn't balance. And remember, the whole point of amortization is to take this discount and spread it out over the life of the loan. So logically what happens is the discount account starts to get smaller. So I would credit this account called discount on bonds payable. And I could post that amount to the account right away, and you'll notice then the net value of this account, it's gone down a little bit. So that's what happens on December 31st of the first year. So the next interest payment period happens in 2017. That's why these boxes are yellow, and it happens 6 months later on June 30th. And actually this becomes very redundant very quickly. So on June 30th of 2017, I'm doing the exact same thing I did here because the contract doesn't change. I got to copy and paste values. So that's the entry that happens on June, and you just make this entry over and over and over and over again 20 times for every payment that happens. And you'll notice the bond then, if I were to post this amount, the discount gets smaller and smaller and smaller. We don't touch the bond payable account because that represents the face value we will repay at the end of the loan. Okay, one last thing. So that's really the answer for the second requirement for A and for B. But it looks like I had a typo in the problem here. Determine the amount of interest expense, the total interest expense for 2010. And this could be for 2016. For 2016, the total interest expense, and the point here is to get your mind away from focusing on just the cash outlay. It's both of those combined, the amount of the amortization of the discount and the cash. So it's $2,090,176 would be the interest expense for 2010. If this said 2017, it would be this amount plus the next payment that's made at the end of December. So it'd be this doubled. So that actually gets you through all three requirements here in this video. Walked you through the number 2 and number 3 requirements.